Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, a global wake-up call for IT security when a major cyber attack like the WannaCry puts the world's cyber defenses into focus. Who has to pay up? Also this week, Wi-Fi on a plane. Why is it so difficult to get online on board? And could that be about to change? Plus, the latest on oil as markets gear up for a key OPEC meeting. Can the world's top producers prevent another collapse in the price of crude? When the WannaCry virus hit companies in at least 150 countries around the world, some called it the beginning of a new era, an era in which hackers have become experts at finding weak spots in our online security. And there was a kind of dawning realization of exactly how vulnerable organizations all over the globe are to cyber criminals. With our lives becoming increasingly connected to the internet, we're likely to see the growth of things like cyber insurance. How do we even start, though, to put a price on our data? And do governments themselves have to start budgeting to protect their populations from cyber extortion? The WannaCry attack targeted Microsoft's Windows operating system using ransomware. It blocked access to computer systems and demanded that victims pay money via the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. The world's biggest software maker was quick to point the finger of blame at the US government. But some experts say that Microsoft is accountable too for the way in which it charges for new versions of its software. Our technology editor Tariq Basley reports on the global nature of the latest threat.
Many countries were on alert as the working week began, fearing the spread of the computer virus would speed up as millions powered on their Windows computers. In China, a leading security software company reported nearly 30,000 institutions, including government agencies and universities, had been hit. Part of the virus, that which allows it to spread from computer to computer, is believed to have been developed by the US National Security Agency, the NSA. It's thought the code was then later stolen by hackers and leaked sometime later. Last month, Microsoft, the maker of Windows, gave users a security update to prevent computers from becoming infected. Now the company's president has hit out at the NSA and says the attack should be a wake-up call for governments. In an online post, Brad Smith said,
"Repeatedly, exploits in the hands of governments have leaked into the public domain and caused widespread damage. An equivalent scenario with conventional weapons would be the US military having some of its Tomahawk missiles stolen. And this most recent attack represents a completely unintended but disconcerting link between the two most serious forms of cybersecurity threats in the world today: nation-state action and organized criminal action."
Other industry analysts say although the NSA may have created part of the virus's code, other similar code is available and being constantly developed by hackers.
The codes like this can be developed by anyone. Any unethical or cyber criminal could develop that code. And so it's more of a responsibility on the information security community, but us, all of us, people, customers, companies, governments, to work harder on securing technologies that we're depending more and more upon.
The spread of the virus appears to have slowed when a British researcher found a so-called kill switch. Security updates also stopped the virus infecting millions more computers. But many security analysts warn there are always new threats. And while this may have been the largest attack of its kind yet, it's unlikely to be the last.
Joining us now from Brussels, Stan van der Kastel, who's the co-founder and CEO of Brussels-based internet security company Sweepatic. Good to have you with us, Stan. I want to start by exploring who has to take ultimate responsibility here for WannaCry. Is it Microsoft or is it the end user who has failed to update their software?
Okay, so I think it's easy to blame each other. I think there is a co-responsibility here. Between, on one hand, the end users, so the companies who need a rigid, a good approach in dealing with threats that are impacting their organization. So they need to be ready. and on the other hand, the security vendors who need a close collaboration with those organizations.
WannaCry is a boon for both companies like Microsoft and companies that deal with internet security. Is it slightly immoral, though, the fact that people have to pay to upgrade their Microsoft software to the latest version? Companies like Apple give their latest software upgrades away for free.
It's an interesting question. I think well, the NHS in the UK, they stopped paying Microsoft for those updates on older operating systems of the Microsoft operating system. So there might be a commercial incentive from the vendor there to lure companies in paying for updates, but I think for critical information infrastructure, the debate should be like, if we digitalize more, if more information is going to be put out there, then we need to make sure that privacy and also the confidentiality, integrity and availability of the information is preserved at all times.
Stan, are we entering a new era for cybercrime, do you think?
Well, first of all, the ransomware campaign from WannaCry that we saw hitting last weekend, that's not new. Ransomware has been around for a few years now, so that's nothing new. The extra that we saw was the self-propagating mechanism, meaning the Windows exploit that was added on top of this ransomware scheme. So it's not something new. It's something that had an impact towards organizations that I would say are not too mature at the moment in their cybersecurity defensive capabilities. So it's something that we have seen now, and there is a lot of media coverage on it. But actually, it's on a day-to-day basis that this battle is ongoing.
As we become more reliant on the so-called Internet of Things, as our homes become more interconnected, more devices in the home are connected to the Internet, is the security situation only going to get worse? Are our homes going to be more vulnerable to attacks like this?
Well, we need to be aware of the fact that we are more and more interconnected with what's out there with the internet. It's no longer a contained environment like our homes, or more and more interconnected with third parties, parties that provide our televisions, our fridges, our cars even. So we need to be aware of this new ecosystem that is being put in place. And again, we need to apply good practices from a cybersecurity perspective on top of those new ecosystems, rather sooner than later.
And how do you go about putting a price on our data, the data that all of us hold on our machines at home and share with the internet? I mean, do you foresee perhaps the advent of a whole new industry here, cyber insurance?
Yeah, so both organizations and individuals should do the exercise themselves, right? What is important for you? What is your most critical information that you possess? Most organizations should be busy with these type of exercises to understand where does it sit, how do I protect it, and then move from there. And an individual will need to make the same conscious decisions, right? To come to your point on the cyber insurance, I see indeed in the market quite some traction on these new cyber insurance propositions. From an organizational perspective, I think that's where it will land first. It's about managing risks, right? So either they accept the risk, they mitigate the risk to an acceptable level, or they will take an insurance against it. So I think cyber insurance has a bright future ahead.
Stan, really good to talk to you. Fascinating. Many thanks indeed.
Thanks.
Now, if you've ever used Wi-Fi aboard an aircraft, it was probably incredibly slow and very expensive. Currently, not every flight offers it, and if you do get online, connectivity can be poor. But that could be about to change. Communications firms say that over half the world's aircraft will be equipped for in-flight Wi-Fi within the next 6 years. And they say superfast airborne Wi-Fi can help airlines attract customers. But with more customers getting online at 30,000 feet, what about security? How vulnerable to attack are the networks that keep aircraft in the sky? Joining us now, Ben Griffin. He's a regional director at Inmarsat Aviation. Ben, welcome to Counting the Cost. When you think of it, the aviation industry these days is run completely by computer, from ticketing to ground ops to air traffic control. Even the aircraft themselves are flown by computer. How vulnerable is the industry to a cyber attack?
Well, I mean, there may well be a proliferation of computer-controlled systems throughout the aviation industry, but they are very well manned and overlooked and supervised by the human touch. Cybersecurity is something which is taken very seriously in all aspects of aviation, the aircraft themselves, of course, and the networks which interact with them.
We're using Wi-Fi on board planes now as well. The nightmare scenario is, of course, that you could have someone who has ill intent sitting in the back of the plane, fiddling with the computer systems at the front, the computer systems. Is that at all possible, or is that science fiction?
Well, it's science fiction, and it's kind of rumour as well. Of course, these systems reside on the aircraft. And a lot of the equipment manufacturers and the airframers themselves, the Boeings and the Airbus, are going through an exercise to segregate all of these systems to make sure that even in the eventuality of someone trying to do that, it's physically very, very difficult, if not impossible, to take control or manipulate the controls of an aircraft, which, by the way, would be incredibly difficult to do anyway.
Well, tell us something about what Inmarsat actually does in the aviation industry. Those of us who fly, we take it very much for granted these days. We don't understand, perhaps, the complexity of the networks that are in place that are keeping us in the air.
So, I mean, there's two elements to it, really. One of which is something that we've been doing for nearly 30 years, which is providing satellite communications to the cockpit, to provide communication to the flight deck and the air traffic control below, so they can report their position, so air traffic can maintain the adequate separation from other aircraft in these airspaces. Typically, over land masses, that's done through alternative technology, radio, for example. But over oceanic or remote land spaces, this is only achievable by a satellite because of the look that satellite has over the globe. So the safety element is one thing, and we've been doing that for a very long time, and we continue to reinvent that and address the requirements of the flight safety element. What's becoming quite headliney now, if you like, is providing services to the passenger and the cabin crew and other peripherals outside of the cockpit, and providing Wi-Fi and telephony services and all sorts of things that us as passengers are used to on the ground, and making sure those sorts of services are available in the air is becoming a demand, if not a necessity, of today's passenger and tomorrow's generation.
Many people watching will have used Wi-Fi aboard a plane and have found it frustratingly slow. Are we ever going to see a time when the connection between the plane and the ground is just as quick as if we were sitting on the ground?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because yes.
Okay.
So you may know that Qatar Airways recently announced their intention, or in fact commitment, to put Inmarsat's kit on board their aircraft and connect to our new satellite network. We've invested over $2 billion in this new satellite network, which is very advanced and will provide significant broadband capability to the aircraft, primarily for the use of the passengers, which is global, which is consistent, and will take away some of those frustrations that we've seen in the market today. So we're very much geared to change the way in which passengers connect and the dependency and reliance they have on those sorts of connections.
Why is it so frustratingly slow? I know you've got the new technology coming in, and that should make it faster for everybody. But is it because you've got, what, potentially 300 people using one single connection to a satellite from the plane?
So that's part of what it boils down to. So, I mean, satellite technology is not simple, and you have to forecast the sort of bandwidths that are required years ahead. So, for example, the satellites that we've launched for our new service were dreamt up and signed up in 2010. And only earlier this week, actually, we launched our fourth satellite of that constellation. So you see the gestation period is quite long, And you have to really forecast and estimate really what the trends of the passenger or the use will be in years to come. And launching a satellite is not exactly trivial either. These things operate at 36,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So to maintain and operate these as well, it's really, well, it's quite literally rocket science actually. So what we've done until now is really, you know, not just us, but also alternative suppliers, is make the best of what's there. Yeah. And now, with this new Global Express service, we've really looked at what the market is demanding and addressed that. So now we have global coverage, we have 4 satellites providing good coverage. We can augment that further by providing higher bandwidth where we need to.
Fascinating. The future's here.
It is indeed.
Great to talk to you. Many thanks indeed for being on Counting the Cost.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Now, earlier in the show, we heard how the Internet of Things could also be a big risk for cybersecurity. This week, Google held its annual developers conference. We heard how the internet search giant now wants to put its artificial intelligence into our iPhones alongside Siri, into coffee tables and kitchens. That means users will be able to effectively talk to their appliances to tell them to boil the kettle, for example. Google's positioning to lead the way in AI. Using Google's email and search engines, we've been providing the company with personal information for nearly 20 years. And it's exactly this data which is teaching computers how to think more like us. Now, earnings from Alibaba this week showed us how online retail in China is continuing to expand. The company is China's biggest online retailer. Revenues rose 60% year on year to $5.6 billion for the 3 months to March. More than 450 million Chinese shoppers used its sites during the quarter. Alibaba is now one of the world's top 10 most valuable companies with a market capitalization of $301 billion. Still to come on Counting the Cost, a gold standard for managing transport around the world, how Hong Kong's MTR rail and property model is inspiring other cities. Oil's been a hot topic this week ahead of the OPEC meeting on May 25th. For the last 6 months, we've had a production cut in place. Compliance has been pretty good. It's been around 90%. And the big hope is that that will continue. Now, Saudi Arabia and Russia have said that they want global producers to continue with the cuts through to 2018. But seasonal factors, which helped to boost compliance in the first half of this year, are now fading away. We're coming up to the time of the year when global demand peaks. And there are other complications. OPEC is struggling to maintain its dominance over US shale producers. And Iranian production is also a bit of an unknown, given the elections there. Well, joining us now from London, Richard Mallinson. He is energy analyst and partner at Energy Aspects. Good to have you with us, Richard. Will Saudi Arabia and Russia be able to convince fellow OPEC members to continue with the production cut?
Well, I think all the signs so far are quite positive. It's very likely that quite a lot of diplomacy was done, at least amongst the GCC and a few key countries, before the Saudi and Russian announcement. But even since they went out with that statement on Monday, we've seen many other countries in the OPEC group and some of the non-OPEC countries that were part of the cuts for the first half of the year confirming that they're keen for an extension. There's been no real dissenting voices so far.
How much control, Richard, does OPEC still have over the global oil market? I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of US shale producers have come online and they've taken a big chunk of the market.
That's very true. US shale production is rising and recovering rapidly. It's benefiting from those higher prices. And really, OPEC and this wider group has no direct means to limit that recovery. If the producers in the US can drill and they can borrow, they can get financing to do it, they're going to do that. But they're still only producing about 5 million barrels a day out of a global market that's 95 million barrels a day. And what we're seeing from the very fact that we're so closely following OPEC's actions and from the fact that their cuts are accelerating the rebalancing process is that OPEC still matters, it still has influence, but it is needing to adapt to the new reality, which is going to include US shale production for the foreseeable future.
Richard, really good to talk to you on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
My pleasure.
Now, Puerto Rico's debt problems are having an impact on its schools. The U.S. Protectorate plans to close 179 schools to help fight more than $70 billion in debts. But thousands of students are not surprisingly worried about their future. Andy Gallagher reports.
For decades, Puerto Rico's schools have been crumbling beneath the weight of massive debt. Like many other institutions here, most have serious infrastructure problems. Now 179 are due to close for good. This elementary school will remain open, but will take in 150 of the 27,000 students due to be relocated. That's double its current student body.
I paint my classroom every year.
English teacher Janet Ferrer is trying to remain optimistic, but has deep concerns about the future.
It's really hard for me to see that we can't be something better in the future. And all I want to do is open doors for everybody to understand that we could do it if we focus and we have the energy in doing it right. And that's my worry.
For parents too, the largest closure of schools in the history of this US territory is a frightening development. Tanya Padua, who's been camped here for days, has 3 children in special education programs.
Luchando por mis hijos.
She tells us she'll keep protesting on their behalf with the hope that their school remains open. She calls the closures unjust. Over the last decade, enrollment in Puerto Rico's schools has dropped by more than 40% as families continue to leave. Those left behind often don't have the means to follow suit, but ultimately it's now Puerto Rico's poorer communities that are paying the price for this island's staggering debt. Thousands of teaching jobs are also due to be cut as Puerto Rico continues to tackle its crippling debt. Secretary of Education Julia Kelleher sees the school closures as an opportunity to solve problems long ignored.
It's daunting, it's monumental, but the only thing that I can bring to it is a sense of discipline and structured analytics that's tempered by a tender heart that has a true commitment for the welfare of these kids.
Over the last few years, 500,000 Puerto Ricans who are US citizens by birth have left for the mainland, an exodus that's expected to continue. It's hoped the closures will save around $7 million a year, but with more than $70 billion of debt, Puerto Rico faces many more tough choices in the years ahead.
Finally this week, Hong Kong is one of the world's most congested and densely populated cities. People rely heavily on its metro network. Sarah Clark takes a look now at a system that's being seen around the world as a model for urban development.
It's the most popular way to travel in Hong Kong. Every day, the 230-kilometre metro network does more than 5.5 million passenger trips.
To be able to maintain a 99.9 reliability in terms of the service that we provide, it's A, very important to the people of Hong Kong, and 2, certainly is a very big task for our staff.
But this is not just a train network. The Mass Transport Rail, also known as the MTR, is a real estate developer. It builds the subway, around it creates malls, which include residential apartments, office space, hotels and retail stores. In many cases, it owns the land or buildings around the station. 2 of the largest skyscrapers in Hong Kong were built by the MTR.
By having a rail plus property model, you are able to build with a purpose, i.e. bringing community to places where there isn't a community. But by having railway or a metro, you're enabling the construction of not just a transport infrastructure, but at the same time the construction of a new community.
It's a rail and property model that works in a city like Hong Kong, where space is limited and vertical living is the norm. The MTR Corporation builds the transport hub and the malls. In exchange for delivering customers to these malls, it then takes a cut of the profits, which is then reinvested to expand and maintain the network. That's all despite fares being less than $1, which is low compared to Tokyo and New York.
Put the investment first and allow the investment to attract further development. And in this way, the government, in fact, they can plan any possible line in advance.
Tens of thousands of people often work, live and play in a single megastructure, and all without going outdoors.
Stops urban sprawl, so it's a very efficient land use. It also allows people to have a lot of meetings in one day. You can do a lot of different activities and pack them in one day because you have incredible accessibility.
With profits of almost $1.5 billion last year, the MTR is considered gold standard for transit management worldwide. It's for that reason it's now being emulated by other cities around the world.
Sarah Clark in Hong Kong, and that's our show for this week. Don't forget, there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That takes you straight to our page. There you'll find individual reports, links, even entire episodes to catch up on. You can also get in touch with us via Twitter. I'm at @afinnegan. Please use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or drop us a line. Counting the Cost at aljazeera.net is our email address. But that's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news is next on Al Jazeera.